Welcome to the Sound of Resistance YouTube channel. Putin's nightmare has come true. America is sending its deadliest weapons to Ukraine for help. The helplessness of the Russian army against Ukraine is growing day by day. The strong defense of the Ukrainian forces has worn out the Russian army. The Ukrainian army, which was getting stronger every day, began to scare the Russians. The number of soldiers and ammunition that Russia lost increased. All the tactics Putin tried failed. All the moves of the Ukrainian army dealt a deep blow to Russia. Having lost almost everything in his hands, Putin is now very tired. Putin was frustrated in the invasion, which he started with the thought of an easy victory. Russia no longer has the strength to withstand the occupation that has lasted for 9 months. Everyone thinks that Putin will give up now. Russian generals are tired of Putin's mistakes. The Russian army does not want to suffer anymore casualties because of the Vladimir Putin's stubbornness. The Russian people also agree with their generals. They think that Putin sent his sons to death on purpose. This indecision that Russia lives within itself continues to grow. In many cities, anti-war Russian partisans took actions. It is said that many fires in Russia were caused by these partisans. The Russian people want to show that their actions will not stop unless Putin withdraws. On the Ukrainian side, everything is going well. The Ukrainian people and army give full support to Volodymyr Zelensky. We can see how much support he gave to Zelensky, especially in the news of the Ukrainian media. A big help to Zelensky came from America. The United States did not hesitate to support Ukraine from the day the occupation began. The United States Senate has given the green light the largest aid package to be sent to Russia-occupied Ukraine since the start of the war. The military, economic, and humanitarian emergency aid package worth approximately $40 billion was accepted in the Senate with 86 yes and 11 no votes, and was submitted to the signature of US President Joe Biden. I applaud Congress for sending a clear message to the world that the people of the United States stand with the brave people of Ukraine in the fight for democracy and freedom, Biden said after the vote. The giant aid package passed the American House of Representatives on May 10th, was sent to Senate. However, due to opposition from the Republican candidates, the package could not be voted on immediately and was put on hold for 10 days. It was noteworthy that all those who voted no, the package in the Senate, were Republicans. If Biden passes the bill into law, the total amount of U.S. aid approved for Ukraine since the Russian invasion, which began on February 24th, would exceed $50 billion. German Finance Minister Christian Lindner told Bloomberg Television that the G7 finance ministers are ready to agree on more than $18 billion in aid for Ukraine's defense work. On the other hand, the Ministry of Finance of Ukraine announced that after the invasion of Russia, approximately $530 million US and British grants were received from a fund established by the World Bank for donations to the Kiev government. Stating that the money reached the state budget, the ministry announced that $500 billion of the amount came from the USA and $30 million from Ukraine. At the beginning of April, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced that the financial aid they collected to support Ukraine reached 10.1 billion euros. Biden announced in his new statement that they will give another support package to Ukraine. The President of the United States of America, Joe Biden, in a phone call with the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, announced that the United States will provide an additional $625 million in military aid to Ukraine. With the last aid package, the U.S. military aid to Ukraine has exceeded $17.5 million. U.S. military aid to Ukraine continues. In a written statement made by the White House, it was stated that the U.S. President Joe Biden and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke on the phone, and that Biden underlined that the U.S. will never recognize Russia's annexation in Ukraine. President Biden pledged to continue supporting Ukraine as it defends itself against Russian aggression, including the provision today of a new $625 million security assistance package that includes additional weapons and equipment, including HIMARS, artillery systems, ammunition, and armored vehicles, the statement said gave. In the statement, it was stated that President Biden is ready to impose serious sanctions on any person, organization, or country that supports the U.S. annexation of Russia to Ukraine, and it was stated that Biden welcomes the agreement signed in Istanbul. The statement also noted that Biden noted the international initiatives for Ukraine's freedom and democracy continue. In the written statement made by the U.S. Department of State, it was stated that the aid package in question was the 22nd military aid package provided to Ukraine since August 2021, and that the aid package will be provided from the inventories of the U.S. Department of Defense. In the statement, it was noted that the total U.S. military aid to Ukraine exceeded $17.5 billion. Why do Americans support Ukraine? As the Russian occupation enters its 9th month, the Americans shows great sympathy for the Ukrainians and support Washington's strong assistance to Kiev. Polls reveal strong Republican and Democratic support for the additional $33 billion in funding that the U.S. President Joe Biden has requested from Congress this week, and the $13.6 billion military and humanitarian aid package that congressmen approved last month. Americans also support Biden's commitment to admit Ukrainian refugees to the United States and speed up their legal entry processes. A Gallup poll conducted between April 1st and April 19th showed that 78% of Americans approve of allowing as many as 100,000 Ukrainian refugees into the United States. For the first time in Gallup's poll on various refugee situations since 1939, the American public has shown the highest levels of support for refugee admission. The support is widespread across the country, regardless of party affiliation, gender, education, income, or region, said Lydia Saad, Gallup's director of U.S. Social Studies. This is not a controversial issue. In such a partisan environment, it is remarkable that the majority of Republicans agree with the majority of Democrats on anything, Lydia told Voice of America. A Reuters Ipsos poll released this week also shown that 73% of Americans support the administration's efforts to supply arms to Ukraine. That support is at its highest since Russia invaded its neighbor in February. There is also widespread support for imposing economic sanctions on Russia. According to the recent Associated Press, 54% of mostly Republican and independent Americans want Biden to toughen his stance on Moscow. The lobbying of more than 1 million Americans of Ukrainian descent across the country also turned in the bipartisan support in Congress. Thanks to this, billions of dollars of military and humanitarian aid are transferred to Kyiv quickly. Americans may also be sympathetic to Ukraine because it's a European and Christian nation. The gap between support for Ukrainians and support for the other groups is also influenced by the conditions in which the groups fled. While Ukraine is under attack by a much larger foreign power, Syria and Central American countries are seen as nations dealing with their own internal problems. Whether it's a brutal dictator or a corrupt government unable to deal with poverty and gang violence, conditions in these countries are much more difficult for Americans to grasp than in Ukraine, where the plot is stark and the will clear. According to Kelso, in the context of Russian occupation, it is easier for Americans to understand and defend the principle of sovereignty than the perceived more obscure conflicts that have been going on for years in the Middle East. Michelle Kelso says that the image of the young and charismatic leader who bravely led her country in times of war also mobilizes support, saying that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is the oppressor for the Americans. Kelsey comments, "We love the oppressed in this country. These benevolent acts of the people of the Ukrainian states of America were applauded by everyone." With these aids, the Ukrainian army got stronger. All of Russia's attacks began to backfire. Putin stated that he was uncomfortable with the aid given to Ukraine. Putin, who had problems with NATO before, realized that he was alone now. Thanks for watching us.